They used to call it the island that screamed. Yeah, not exactly the travel brochure vibe, right? Somewhere out in the Pacific, you've got a forgotten Japanese outpost, half swallowed by jungle, where the guys posted there swore the trees whispered their names at night. Like actually whispered. Patrols would come back looking like they'd seen a ghost, and the silence? People said it wasn't really silent at all. More like it was hiding something with teeth. So what the hell was really going on in that creepy fortress? Well, buckle up, because tonight on War Files Uncovered, we're digging into one of the spookiest war stories you've probably never heard. No, seriously, stay with me on this. If you love the weird side of history, smash that subscribe button and stick around, because whatever haunted this place, it's still echoing out there somewhere. It all kicks off in 1944, right in the sweaty armpit of the Pacific, when things were going sideways for the Japanese Empire. They're losing islands left and right, their so-called invincible forces getting chewed up in the jungle. Out there, scattered across lava rocks and reefs nobody could pronounce, were these weird little outposts. Most of them nobody remembers. But one, no name, not on any map, just a bad rumor among the guys who got stationed there, earned a reputation for being, well, not normal. And get this, it wasn't the Americans or the bombs that made it infamous. Nah, it was weirder than that. Guys started saying the island itself was alive or maybe haunted, like there was something in the caves and the trees that wanted you gone. Even the seasoned vets, the ones who'd already seen hell in China or the Philippines, started sending letters home that read less like battle reports and more like bedtime stories for insomniacs. Shadows moving without wind. Voices calling your name from the darkest part of the brush. Pure nightmare fuel. At first, the officers just rolled their eyes, figured it was nerves or the heat or somebody cracking under pressure. Let's be honest, 300 men stuck on a rock in the middle of nowhere? Things get weird. But the stories kept piling up. A corporal swore something was following him, just out of sight, never getting closer, never going away. One guy heard a woman crying in the mangroves, which, yeah, weird because there were 0 women on the island. Then there was the poor bastard who came stumbling back, white as a sheet, after hearing a scream that just wouldn't stop, like the whole jungle was breathing down his neck. Things got real when people started disappearing. A whole patrol just vanished. Search parties found nothing. Then, out of nowhere, gunfire erupts by the cliffs. Turns out 2 guys were blasting away at the trees, convinced they were under attack. In the daylight? Zilch. Not a footprint. Not a single broken branch. One of them later claimed he heard someone call out his childhood nickname, something nobody else on the island could have known. After that, he basically shut down. Wouldn't talk. Totally broken. Word got around fast. Pretty soon, even the supply crews didn't want to set foot there. They said the silence felt wrong, too heavy, like the air itself was pissed off at you. Pilots flying overhead picked up weird bursts of static on their radios, like voices trying to claw their way through the noise. Still, orders were orders. The garrison had to hold the island no matter what. No reinforcements, no way out. Just them, the jungle, and whatever was making all that noise in the dark. And honestly, I don't blame a single one of them for being scared. Yeah, that was when the diaries started cropping up. Scraps of panic, scratched out by guys who kinda knew they were already ghosts. One story, someone dug it up years later in a box full of rust and dead spiders, painted the nights as straight up hell. The guy talks about lying there, sweat sticking his shirt to his back, listening to the palms outside, thinking it's just leaves rustling. Then he realizes, nope, that's not leaves at all. Someone, or something, is breathing. Slow, heavy. Like it's right there, just out of sight, leaning over him in the dark. Freaky, right? Another guy wrote about those caves in the cliffs, said the echoes felt alive. Even when nobody spoke, the rocks would throw voices back at them, warped and whispery, like the island itself was eavesdropping. He had one night where the echoes didn't fade out when the talking stopped. They just kept going, muttering the men's words back, only deeper, twisted, almost making fun of them. The officers. Pretty much losing it trying to keep the guys in line. Word got around that the place was cursed, burial ground for the unlucky before the war even started. Some dudes shrugged it off, blaming jungle fever or nerves, but honestly the fear was thick enough to chew. Guys just stopped volunteering for night shifts, and nobody wanted to patrol certain trails. Whole sections of the jungle became no-go zones. Not because of the enemy, but because of whatever else was out there. Something you couldn't see, couldn't shoot, but felt anyway. And then September rolls around and the wheels fall off. One night, right before 4 a.m., the whole camp gets blasted awake by this sound, like thunder but not. No guns, no bombs. Just this scream so high and drawn out it made your skin crawl. It wasn't coming from one spot, it was everywhere. Guys pour out, guns shaking, searching the shadows. Some swear it sounded human, some say animal, but everyone agrees they'd never heard anything like it before or since. The scream just kept going, bouncing off the cliffs, then finally faded. When the sun came up, nothing. No bodies, no footprints, not even a snapped twig. Like the whole thing was a bad dream, except every single guy remembered the exact same chill, like that scream had been meant just for them. After that, the letters home got desperate. Guys begged their families to pray, not for the war, but for whatever had sunk its claws into their heads. One letter smuggled out on a supply run just said, "The island is not empty. It never sleeps. At night it watches us." The guy who wrote that. Gone by morning, bed empty, rifle left behind like a bad omen. Official report called it desertion, but nobody really bought that. Not like you could just walk off that island and into the blue. Time dragged on and the island got quieter. Not peaceful, more like everyone was holding their breath. Guys stopped talking. Their faces went slack, their eyes hollowed out. Silence wasn't calm, it was suffocating, like the whole place was pressing down on them. The Americans never showed. Bombers would buzz overhead now and then, but mostly the garrison just sat there, rotting from the inside out. Some history nerds say it was combat stress, brains cracking under pressure. But anyone who's read those diaries notices the weird part. The stories line up. Same sounds, same scream, even when the guys were isolated, not talking to each other. In the end, the island won. After the surrender, rescue crews showed up and found nothing but ghosts. Bunkers, empty. Supplies, untouched. Weapons, stacked up neat in places nobody remembered putting them. A couple bones scattered in the brush, but the men? Gone. It was like the island just swallowed them. And that's not even the end of it. Years pass and fishermen still steer clear after dark, talking about weird noises drifting out over the water. Moans, shrieks, stuff that makes you want to turn around fast. No one's tried to live there since. On the old maps, it's just a name, but out on the ocean they still whisper about it. Cursed, haunted, alive. The guys who serve there? They call it something worse. To them, it was just the island that screamed. Man, the jungle on that godforsaken outpost? It was nothing like the usual stuff Japanese soldiers slogged through. The air felt like soup, thick, sticky, practically sitting on your chest. Nights were the worst. You'd just be lying there, not moving a muscle, and sweat would still pour off you. And the canopy? Forget seeing the stars. It was like someone threw a blackout curtain over the whole island. Lanterns, torches, they barely made a dent in that kind of darkness. And you know what? Light didn't make anything better. If anything, it just let whatever was out there know exactly where you were. Flickers at the edge of vision, branches shaking, something slithering off if you so much as glanced its way. Standing guard wasn't about spotting Americans, it was about not losing it, not spinning around every 5 seconds because you swore something was breathing down your neck. They found this one soldier's diary half-rotted in a collapsed bunker. Stuff in there? Gives historians the chills even now. He wrote about hearing his mom's voice, yeah, his mother, calling him home while he was alone up on some cliff. Said it was so real he almost just walked right off the edge, convinced she was waiting down there in the dark. Another guy said he smelled incense, that sweet temple kind you only get back home, right in the middle of the jungle. No way it was actually there. He even heard chanting, but not in any language he knew. It wasn't just those two either. Lots of guys started reporting weird stuff. Sometimes it was sounds, sometimes smells, sometimes full-blown visions. It was like the island was rifling through their brains, picking out the stuff that mattered most, then twisting it around and shoving it back at them. By the time October 44 rolled around, everyone was wound so tight you could practically hear the nerves snapping. The major in charge, tough old bastard who'd survived China, tried to fix things by leading patrols himself. Like, hey guys, watch me, nothing to be scared of. Yeah, right. He took them down into this ravine, black rock everywhere, echoes bouncing like crazy. But the echoes, they didn't sound right. The soldiers said it was like their own voices got stacked with others, whispers layered underneath, speaking in voices nobody recognized. The major freaked, started yelling for everyone to shut up, but the echoes kept going, mimicking him, twisting his words, almost laughing at him. That night, he locked himself in his room and didn't come out till morning. Never led another patrol after that. He basically lost the whole unit's respect overnight. Food ran out, guys got skinnier, eyes hollowed out, stumbling around like ghosts. But honestly, hunger wasn't what kept them up. It was the screaming. Started out rare, then it was every week, then almost every night, always in that dead time between 2 and 4 in the morning. Never from the same place, never something you could track down. Some guys tried blocking their ears, but the sound just went straight through them, rattling their bones. Other guys said the screaming wasn't even outside. It was inside their heads, like something just dropped a nightmare straight into their brains. They tried recording it, but the gear picked up nothing but static. Still, some swore they heard voices under all that fuzz, words flickering between Japanese, English, and something nobody could name. Like the island itself was trying to talk to them, and not for any good reason. Yeah, things got ugly fast. Guys started snapping, like really losing it. Suicide wasn't exactly something people talked about, but it happened. There was that poor bastard they found swinging from a banyan at dawn, face all twisted in terror, eyes stuck wide open like he saw something you couldn't run from. Another one turned up floating in the shallows, dead but with no marks on him. It's weird. Anyone who checked them out said they looked like they died right in the middle of a scream. Mouths frozen open, like the jungle's nightly howling just crawled into them and never left. By December, the whole post was coming apart at the seams. Letters home? Total mess. Half the time you couldn't even tell what they meant. One scrap they found after the war read, "We dig tunnels, but the walls breathe. The island moves when we sleep. It wants us below." Someone else wrote in the margins of a supply log, "The trees whisper names. Mine was called last night. I will not answer." Bullets and bombs didn't take these guys out. Nah, it was something sneakier, something that just wormed its way into their heads and wouldn't leave. Stories started to spread, guys just wandering into the green and never coming back. Some folks said the screams drew them in like hypnotized. Others figured they just wanted to get away from the god-awful quiet and the fear pressing in every night. But then you'd hear weirder stuff. One guy swore he saw a buddy just stroll barefoot into the jungle, not a care in the world, even though the ground was all sharp volcanic rock. Another claimed men vanished right off guard duty. One minute they're there, next minute, bam, just a dropped rifle in empty air like something invisible just snatched them away. Everything finally hit the fan one night in January 45. Middle of the night, the camp erupts, gunfire everywhere, grenades going off, flares lighting up the trees. Everyone lost it, thought the Americans were coming or something. But daylight comes and there's nothing. No enemy, no bodies, just a camp full of jumpy, half-crazy soldiers staring at each other, surrounded by empty shell casings. The major? Guy was shattered, just kept mumbling, "It knows we are here," over and over. That was pretty much the last anyone heard from them. Fast forward to after Japan surrendered, Allied teams land on the island, ready for whatever. What do they find? Not much. Bunkers still standing, guns stacked, even food left behind, looking like someone just stepped out for a smoke. But no people. No bodies, no mesh, just nothing. Only thing left was scraps, bits of diaries, letters, and weird carvings inside the caves. Some looked Japanese, others were just something else. Nobody's figured those out, not even now. Even the post-war crews got spooked. Radios fritzed out near the cliffs. One sailor swore he heard laughter at night, echoing across the water, even though the place was empty as a tomb. Another guy thought he saw shapes moving in the trees, but when they went to check, nada. Wasn't long before the Americans bailed, scrubbing the island off maps and pretending it didn't exist. Locals? They kept telling stories, voices calling from the sea, screams from the jungle, long after the war was ancient history. So yeah, the legend stuck. People said it was just what war does to your brain, men cracking under the pressure. Others? They figured something older woke up in that volcanic rock, something that didn't like being disturbed. But for the guys who vanished, for the ones who disappeared into those screaming trees, it wasn't a legend at all. It was real. And whatever it was, it's the last thing they ever heard. When the war finally sputtered out and the Americans rolled over the Pacific like a tidal wave, most Japanese garrisons gave up without much fuss. Hungry, beat down, just glad to throw in the towel. Not here though. Not on the island that screamed. Surrender? Forget it. When the Allies showed up in September 45, the place felt so empty it made even the guys who'd survived Iwo Jima shift uncomfortably. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was the kind that gets under your skin, like the air itself was holding secrets it wasn't ready to spill. No white flags, no desperate soldiers stumbling out with their arms up. Just nothing. It was like everyone had vanished, poof, leaving only ghosts behind. American troops fanned out, nerves jangling, half expecting to get shot at or blown up by something nasty rigged in the sand. Instead, things just got weirder. The cliffs were riddled with tunnels, all deserted. Barracks looked like someone had just stepped out for a smoke and never came back. Pots still had old, furry rice in them. Rifles stacked in neat little rows, bayonets gleaming, ammo untouched. It didn't look like a retreat or a massacre. More like they'd lined up for roll call and never got dismissed. But the caves, that's where it got real bad. Scratches everywhere, some Japanese, dates and names and scraps of prayers. But then there were these freaky symbols. Spirals, jagged faces with open mouths, stuff that looked like it belonged in a nightmare, not a military outpost. The kind of thing you'd expect at a cult meeting, not from a bunch of starving soldiers. The Yanks gathered up whatever papers hadn't already rotted, wrote their reports and, surprise, surprise, none of it made the public archives. Easier to just say, yeah, they disappeared. Probably starved or snuck off in the night. But some guys couldn't shake it. Decades later, this old sailor admitted he still woke up sweating, swearing he could hear people screaming. He remembered lying in a patrol boat off that cursed shore, hearing something howl across the waves. Claimed he told himself it was birds, but deep down, he knew better. After that, people steered clear. Fishermen wouldn't go near the place. They said their compasses spun around like they were possessed. Nets came up empty as if the sea itself was warning them to beat it. A few thrill seekers, mostly reporters or ex-soldiers with more guts than sense, tried landing in the late 50s. One Japanese team made camp in 57. 2 nights, nothing. Third morning, smoke, gunshots, then radio silence. When locals checked it out, everything was still there, cameras, notebooks, supplies, but not a soul in sight. Not even a body. Tokyo papers ran the story for about a minute and then buried it. All it did was make the legend grow teeth. By the time the 70s rolled around, the island was full-blown haunted house material. Cursed, people said. The kind of place where the dead didn't rest and the jungle ate anyone dumb enough to set foot ashore. There was this fisherman, claimed he heard voices chanting in Japanese as he drifted past at dusk, even though nobody had lived there for years. Another guy swore he saw lanterns moving in the trees, but when he brought friends back, the place was pitch black and dead quiet. Then came the diaries. Mid-80s, some rusted box washes up on a Philippine beach, stuffed with soggy, half-rotten papers. Turns out they belonged to the lost garrison. And man, if you thought the rumors were bad, these notes were 100 times worse. One scribble, "We are called in our dreams. The voices are louder now. They tell us we must go below." Another was just a mess, barely readable. "The caves are not empty. The walls breathe. The screaming never ends. It comes from inside the stone. The major left a final bombshell. If we leave, it will follow. If we stay, we are its. Forgive us." Yeah. Not exactly a place you'd want on your travel bucket list. What happened after that? Honestly, no one's got a clue. Did those guys just stroll off into the jungle like, well, guess I live here now? Or did they disappear underground, crawling into caves and never coming back up? Maybe something just plucked them away one after another? Some invisible nightmare straight out of a campfire tale. Nobody's got proof, just a pile of weirdness that keeps getting bigger. The US Navy poked around and sure, they admitted, way back in some dusty 90s paperwork, that Japanese units on these out-of-the-way islands lost their minds in ways nobody could explain. Supernatural stuff? Officially nope. But if you squint at the margins in those files, you'll spot some officers' scribbled notes about persistent auditory anomalies and collective hysteria beyond precedent. Yeah, that's not exactly comforting. Fast forward to the 2000s, and you still couldn't pay anyone to camp there overnight. The few adrenaline junkies who tried? Their gear glitched out, cameras died, batteries tanked like they'd been cursed. Some said they caught freaky sounds, moaning, wailing, just wind maybe, but not quite. No patterns, nothing science could pin down. In 2005, this squad of documentary filmmakers rolled up, thinking they'd crack the case. Their boat captain was having none of it, wouldn't get closer than 2 miles, blamed it on old stories, which is code for, absolutely not, I like living. They barely lasted a night. Phones ringing off the hook, but nobody on the other end. By sunrise, they were gone, freaked out, swearing never to set foot there again. The footage? Some of it leaked later. Jumpy shots of the crew staring wide-eyed into the trees, whispering that something in the dark was calling them by name. Yeah, hard pass. So the island just sits there. Doesn't even show up on most maps. Sailors steer clear, governments pretend it's not their problem, jungle swallowing the old bunkers and any scrap of evidence that ever existed. The legend, though, that's the one thing too stubborn to die. Some people shrug it off, just another wartime ghost story. Others? They're convinced something ancient and angry is still camped out there, and the past isn't done screaming yet. And if you hear about it, I guarantee you'll start wondering, what exactly did those soldiers hear after dark? Was it guilt, fear, or something way older than anyone wants to admit? Even now, sailors swear as they pass those cliffs they can hear it. A cry that's not quite human, not quite wind, just endless. It rolls across the waves, gets under your skin. The island that screamed? Still screaming. might never stop. When World War II finally sputtered out, everyone figured peace would just settle over the Pacific, like a heavy blanket after years of gunfire and hell. But for this island, the one that howled, the quiet was worse than the noise. Allied patrols poked around, noticed the Japanese garrison had just poofed. Their reports got stamped, filed, then buried in the mountain of post-war mess. Who cared, right? The world was busy gluing itself back together, not losing sleep over some blip of jungle where 300 men just vanished. Thing is, silence doesn't just sit there. It creeps, sinks into your bones, cracks open old memories, and before you know it, you've got yourself a ghost story nobody can look away from. Fast forward to the 50s. In Tokyo, the old-timers started buzzing. Widows of the missing soldiers kept poking the bear. Where were the bodies? Why no graves? Why did the paperwork just say, disappeared under unknown circumstances, like some bureaucratic shrug? They got zip, no closure, only a big echoing void. And boy does a void breed rumors. Some folks thought the garrison bailed, maybe island hopped and started new lives. Others, with a taste for the spooky, claimed the men got snatched, not by the Yanks but by something else entirely. Then in 57, someone tried to smash the silence. Harada Kenji, ex-lieutenant, he'd never set foot on that doomed island during the war, but he sure was obsessed. Said he wanted to honor the lost guys with a little ceremony, stick up some headstones. People who actually knew Harada? They said he was chasing ghosts, haunted by tales from supply crews, about screams echoing through the trees and soldiers vanishing like bad dreams. Harada dragged two buddies along, landed on the island in July, called in once to say, "Hey, we made it." After that, nothing. A few days later, fishermen spotted smoke twisting up from the jungle. The rescue team found a nightmare. Tents shredded, gear everywhere, not a soul in sight. No bodies, no drag marks, no footprints. Harada and his pals just gone. Cue the headlines, Island of Death. Cursed Pacific Rock. All caps, big drama. But the Cold War cranked up and soon enough nobody cared. Well, except the fishermen. They kept their distance, muttering about compasses spinning like tops, empty nets, weird lights flickering through the canopy. The creepiest stuff? The sounds. Moans floating over the water, screams that seemed to rise and fall with the tide. Sometimes even their own names, whispered in voices that sounded wrong. Most guys would rather burn extra fuel than sail anywhere near that place. Jump to the 70s. Japan's economy booms and suddenly, everyone's obsessed with old wartime riddles. TV crews tracked down the guys who brought supplies to the island. One old sailor just broke down on camera, sobbing about unloading crates while something cried out from the trees. Another guy said he'd seen the soldiers standing like statues, eyes glazed over, as if tuned to a radio station no one else could hear. Did they go nuts? The reporter asked. The sailor just shook his head. No. It was the island. That same year, some university kids got it in their heads to play Ghostbusters. Cameras, tape recorders, the works. They lasted all of 12 hours before stumbling back to their boat at sunrise, pale as ghosts, lips clamped shut. Years later, one of them spilled in a memoir. Inside the caves they'd heard screaming, only it didn't sound normal. It didn't echo forward, but backward like the rocks were coughing up ancient pain. As the story spread, wild theories popped up. Some folks pointed fingers at volcanic gas. Maybe the soldiers all tripped out and lost their minds. Others blamed infrasound. Earth rumbles so deep you just feel dread, nausea, and the sense that something's watching you. The skeptics? They starved, got sick, died, and the rest is just people spinning yarns. But none of that explains why people kept vanishing after the war. Why fishermen still heard voices. Why those students staggered off the island, too shaken to talk. Honestly, who knows what happened out there? But whatever it was, it sure as hell didn't stay buried. One of the creepiest things came out in 1983, when this retired American intel guy dropped bits from old Navy logs, like straight out of a Cold War thriller. There's this entry from September 27, 1945. Recovery crews anchored at night, and suddenly, bam, auditory anomalies. Basically, people on deck heard screaming. Real, drawn-out, human screaming coming from the island. The officer in charge? Dude just writes, crew reports sustained screaming sounds originating inland. No signs of survivors found upon inspection. Recommend no further overnight anchorage in proximity. And then, of course, the log gets buried in a mountain of paperwork. Nobody wants to touch it. But the wording? It's nearly identical to what Japanese survivors swore they heard. So yeah, Americans caught it too. Flash ahead to 89 and this legend just gets weirder. A Philippine fishing crew vanishes near the island. Poof, gone. Their boat turns up drifting by itself, nets hanging loose, half-eaten meals still on the stove. No blood, no busted hull, not even a bad weather report. Just nothing. The local folks absolutely refused to tow that boat back. Nope, let it float off and sink. They figured the island gobbled up the fishermen, same way it did with the Japanese soldiers decades before. Mess with the island messes with you. And then satellites show up in the 90s. The age of answers, everyone said. Not so much. All the images show is jungle choking the place, cliffs, just this green mess. But then, analysts start noticing weird clearings deep in the trees, shapes that look a little too neat, too round or square to just be nature doing its thing. Some say it's old Japanese bunkers. Others think ritual sites. Creepy, right? Circles hacked out of the forest and nobody's got a good reason why. Of course, conspiracy nuts go wild. Secret labs, post-war experiments, the whole 9 yards. Still, no official word from any government. Nobody's stepping up to claim they've set foot there since the war. Then came 2005. A film crew gets the bright idea to do a haunted island doc. They roll up with enough gear to film a Marvel movie, satellite phones, thermal cams, fancy audio stuff. Their captain, this salty old sailor, flat out refuses to anchor within 2 miles. Says, the water is bad there. You can feel it in your bones. And honestly, when a guy like that gets spooked, you listen. So the crew paddles in on dinky inflatable boats. For a while, it's nothing. Just overgrown bunkers, tunnels caved in, helmets rusting away in the jungle. Then night hits. This is where it goes full Blair Witch. The cameraman's notes, which naturally leak online, talk about their phones blowing up with calls. No number, no voice, just dead air. Then those sounds. Far off at first like the wind's got teeth. Then sharper, closer, and suddenly it's screaming. Real, blood-curdling screaming. The team loses it. Some say they heard their own names echoing out there. A couple swear they saw people, or like shapes, moving between the trees. By morning they're bailing, leaving behind all that expensive gear. Only a handful of shaky, panicked clips survived. Jungle flashes of terrified faces, audio cutting out with static bursts. The documentary? Never saw the light of day. So now the island's still out there. No one lives on it, and the only thing marking it is a warning slapped on nautical charts. No anchorage. Locals, they just call it cursed. Historians? They treat it like a quirky footnote, maybe a blip in a bigger war story. But if you talk to the folks who've heard the stories, or worse, those who've heard the screams themselves, it's more than just a legend. Some ghosts, they don't really care if you believe in them or not. And the worst part? People say the screaming never actually stopped. Fishermen drifting too close, sailors out under a moonless sky, they still hear it. Even now, somewhere out there in the dark, the island that screamed just keeps on screaming. And nobody's got a clue why. Way out there, smack in the middle of the Pacific's endless blue, where waves smash volcanic cliffs and the jungle basically wants to eat you alive, a bunch of stranded soldiers started collecting secrets like scars. Sure, they made it through hunger, fever, and the ocean's endless racket, but ask any of them what really haunted their dreams? It wasn't the war. It was the damn island. Nights were the worst. Gunfire was history, Japan had already gone up in smoke, but the whispers? Those stuck around. Voices that didn't belong to anyone alive drifted through the trees. The island itself, seriously, it was barely a chunk of rock like a busted tooth jutting out of the water. But the jungle, man, that place could hide anything. Trees packed so tight, even at noon it looked like twilight. Overhead, the branches knitted together, less like leaves and more like a lid, trapping them inside. Guys swore they saw pale shapes slipping between the shadows, moving just out of sight. Every so often someone would hear footsteps crunching past the edge of camp, but no enemy ever showed. And when they yelled into the darkness, their own voices slithered back, warped and wrong, like the jungle was having a laugh at their expense. There was this one guy, I think he was a cook or something, who, decades later, said time didn't work right on that rock. Days, nights, dreams, all kind of smeared together. He remembered doing a patrol and hearing his mother's voice, soft and desperate, calling from deep in the brush. Yeah, his mom. Another dude said he heard guys screaming, bayonets and all, even though nobody'd fired a shot in months. At first, they chalked it up to nerves or heat stroke or just losing it from too many days eating rice and bugs. But the stories kept piling up, and soon enough, everyone started looking over their shoulders. Here's the thing, these men were trained to fight, not to listen to ghosts. But the island didn't care about training. It was like something ancient was buried beneath the roots, twisting sound, making it meaner. And no matter how bad things got, orders were orders. Stay put. Wait for relief. So they did, trapped by duty, trapped by the island, basically prisoners of both. As food ran low, the jungle seemed to notice. Like it smelled their fear or something, pressing in closer. The voices got louder too. No more whispers. These were full-on conversations, orders barked in dead men's voices, or sobs that sounded like lost kids. Fires didn't help. They kept them burning anyway, hoping flames might scare off whatever was out there. Didn't work. Guys would wake up to find someone else sitting bolt upright, mumbling back to the trees, arguing with the invisible. Some tried to fight it, covering their ears, humming tunes from home, whatever. Once the voices got in, though, forget about peace and quiet. Meanwhile, the rest of the world moved on. The war officially ended, cities got flattened, emperors surrendered. These poor bastards? Nobody told them. They kept rotting away on that chunk of rock, stuck in their own private hell. The jungle whispered, the island screamed. Years later, nobody could say for sure, were the voices just in their heads, or was the island itself alive, chewing up their fears and spitting them back until something in them snapped? Hell if I know. But if you ask me, that place never really let them leave. When the war sputtered to an end in 45, the Pacific was just this graveyard. Rusted ships, bleached bones, all the leftovers of madness. Scattered across nowhere, Japanese outposts sat cut off, forgotten, basically ghosts with beating hearts. It wasn't till weeks later, honestly probably longer than anyone wants to admit, that some American patrol boat spots these half-starved figures waving like maniacs from the tree line of some island nobody bothered to name. The relief crews come in bracing for skeletons, but what they find? Guys with eyes sunken so deep you almost expect to see straight through to the other side. Some flinch when you call them by name. Most of them white-knuckle their useless rifles like it's the only thing standing between them and whatever's out there. They won't talk. Not really. It's like the trees are listening, and the punishment for spilling secrets is worse than anything the war threw at them. When some poor sap tries to ask what happened, the answers just splinter apart. One claims the place is haunted, another just cracks and balls, and a few stare into the jungle like they're waiting for something to crawl out. Americans shrug. Just another bunch of broken men, casualties of hunger and being alone too long. And yet, buried in all the shaken-up stories, there's this one thing nobody ever shakes. The island screamed at night. Skip ahead, 1950s, Japan's patching up the ruins, sweeping the nightmares under the rug. But a few old soldiers who made it off that island, they start talking, quietly as if the walls still have ears. The stuff they describe. You'd think they were making it up if their hands didn't shake while they spoke. Patrols where guys just disappeared, gone into the green with only a scream left hanging. Footsteps that circled the camp but never showed a face. Voices, perfect copies of dead friends calling out orders nobody gave. One officer admits, decades later, voice cracking, that he almost shot his own men, convinced they were spies because the voices snapped commands in flawless Japanese, but nobody's lips moved. The wildest bit comes from a man who, even in old age, swears the voices still chase him in his dreams. Same words, same pleading as back then. The Americans? Oh, they've got their stories too, even if nobody ever wrote them down. They talk about birds and bugs going mute, just dead silence like the forest itself stopped breathing. One Marine remembers lying awake his first night, hearing somebody sobbing out in the black. Except when they went to look, nothing. Another says the air felt thick, strange, like it carried sounds that stretched and warped, echoes that just wouldn't die. None of this made it into the official record. Chalked up to nerves, maybe too much sun. But off the books, the legend grew, the island that screamed. Time goes by. Journalists, researchers, thrill seekers, they all try to crack the case. Some say it's just nature being weird, wind through rocks, waves in hidden caves, birds with freaky calls. Others point to fever, starvation, the mind chewing on itself. But every explanation stumbles over the same damn thing. Too many people, spread across too many years, all describing the same chills, the same screams, details matching up a little too well for comfort. Coincidence? Please. Not when dozens of voices, decades apart, are basically singing the same haunted tune. The jungle stayed thick, the silence stuck around, and according to those who dared to camp out, the screams? Still there. Still waiting. But here's the kicker, it's not even about what made the voices. It's why. The cries always aimed straight at the soldiers. Not just random wailing but personal, calling names, copying voices, digging into memories like it knew exactly where to poke. Like the island itself wanted to break them apart. When the last old-timers whispered what they remembered, when the historians swapped their notes, nothing really changed. The island kept its secrets under the vines and shadows. Only the surf kept pounding, only the leaves kept whispering, until darkness dropped again, and the screaming started up just like before. By the end of the 70s, some folks, mostly nosy reporters and history nerds, got hooked on the mystery of the island. They'd pieced together scraps of old veteran stories, nothing concrete, just enough to get obsessed. Unofficial maps? Still just a string of numbers and letters like the place never had a real name. But word was getting around, especially in those dim Tokyo bars where the old soldiers nursed their drinks and memories in equal silence. Then these Australian documentary guys managed to wrangle permission to check the place out, all bright-eyed, thinking they'd catch some war relics half swallowed by vines. You know, rusty helmets, bunkers creaking with moss, maybe a stray femur if things got spicy. But man, they weren't ready for the island itself. Not even close. Barely a few hours after landing, their gear started acting weird. Mics picking up these ghostly noises under the regular chatter, little scraps of voices that nobody remembered saying. Playback just made it creepier. Warped words, voices all out of whack, and at one point, a sound tech just lost it, swearing he'd heard his own name whispered dead clear, even though he'd been silent the whole time. Interference maybe, but you could see it shook them. The locals, mostly fishermen who'd steered clear for decades, suddenly had stories to spill now that outsiders seemed interested. Apparently, their dads and granddads had made it a rule: don't fish near the island's reefs unless you want your nets shredded and your catch reeking of something unholy. And at night, sometimes, the wind would blow and carrying the sound of men barking orders in Japanese, even though there hadn't been a garrison there since the war. One guy, he said as a kid he got too close in a little boat and heard what sounded like a whole choir of screams pouring out from the jungle. Said it shook the hull so bad he never went back. Can't really blame him. The documentary crew? They didn't last. After 3 days they'd had enough, couldn't handle the heavy feeling in the air, gear going haywire, batteries dying way too fast, cameras glitching like they were haunted. Most of their footage never saw daylight, just bits and pieces floating around in random film circles. But those fragments? They started the whole legend all over again. By the 80s you had ghost hunters and paranormal experts poking around, treating the place like some kind of Japanese Chernobyl, a zone with a pulse and a temper. Not just haunted, they said, alive, and not in a good way. Then in '91 things got real official. A big-shot group of Japanese scholars, military historians, even a couple of priests, all hoping they'd finally crack the riddle. 2 weeks, they said. They lasted 6 days. Came back looking like they'd seen something you don't talk about in polite company. For years, nobody said much until one guy finally spilled the beans. He talked about the jungle at night, how the whispers came in flawless Japanese, voices from men long dead, and if you called out, the voices answered. If you moved, they moved. By the last night, he couldn't even tell if he was hearing with his ears or if his brain was just fried. The worst part? He said it was 3:42 a.m. last night there, and everyone woke up at once to this deep, raw scream that rumbled up from the dirt itself. Like the whole island was bellowing. They ditched camp at first light. Officially, it was logistical issues. In reality, most of them quit fieldwork forever after that. They just didn't have it in them anymore. By the late 90s, the stories had made their way online, where every weirdo with a dial-up connection and a taste for the spooky was trading rumors. Blurry satellite images, gossip about U.S. archives mentioning acoustic anomalies, the works. Nothing ever pinned down, but the legend only got weirder as it spread. Still, at the heart of it all, there was this one thing nobody could shake. After all that time, the island never shut up. The jungle kept screaming, and anybody who got too close came back different if they came back at all. By the 2000s, the island story was basically hanging out in that weird limbo between urban legend and something your granddad's buddy swears actually happened. You'd catch bits of it in half-drunk pub rambles, or on those sketchy old message boards where everyone had a conspiracy theory. But then, tech started catching up. Suddenly, people had these pocket-sized recorders and could beam stuff up to satellites like it was nothing. Cue a whole new crew of thrill-seekers, obsessed with nailing down proof. Not just, my cousin heard a thing, but cold, hard data. So in 2005, this wild mix of sound geeks, ex-military types who probably owned too much camo, and a few academics who clearly missed the memo about safer hobbies, landed on the island. Mission: record the infamous voices. They showed up loaded with thermal cams, those freaky sensitive mics, and enough sensors to make NASA jealous. If the jungle screamed, this lot was ready to catch every decibel. Except, nothing. First few days, nada. The forest just pressed in, dead quiet, like it was holding its breath for the cameras. The crew started cracking jokes. Maybe the stories were just bar chatter or the island was shy. Then the tech started acting up. Batteries tanked in no time, compasses spun like they were drunk, and GPS? Useless. Sometimes it looked like they were in two places at once. Messed up, right? Then 2:17 a.m., third night. The sound recorders caught something that made everyone's blood run cold. Starts with this mechanical hum, then it just explodes, human voices, all tangled up and frantic. Men yelling in Japanese, overlapping like someone had dropped them into the middle of a war zone. Nobody on the team spoke Japanese, but panic's pretty much universal. They played it back later, got a linguist on the line, and yeah, stuff like hold the line, they're coming, we are surrounded. It was pure desperation, the kind you don't fake. These were voices from 60 years ago, easy. It just got weirder from there. Some nights, the jungle felt alive, like something unseen was stalking right alongside them. Shadows darted around, tall shapes in uniforms, gone the second anyone pointed a flashlight. Fifth night, 3:42 a.m., same hour the old Japanese records talked about, the ground literally shook. This massive scream tore out from under the earth, rattled the tents, knocked over a sensor. Lasted 13 seconds, which is 13 seconds too long. The recording survived. Skeptics on the team, even the it's all swamp gas types, had nothing. Not a storm, not an animal, not anything you'd want to meet in daylight. It sounded like 100 voices mashed into one, and not angry, just pure raw pain. They bailed before sunrise, left thousands of dollars worth of gear behind. The official report? Never saw daylight. The raw audio? Gone, classified stuff somewhere deep. Still stuff leaks. A file called Pacific_042005.wave started making the rounds in some pretty dark corners of the internet. People who heard it said it wasn't just noise. It hurt. Like every scream crawled inside your chest and sat there. Someone swore there was another voice in there too. Slow the recording down and you'd catch a whisper in English clear as day, "Help us." No. The island's still empty. Good luck finding it on Google Maps. The coordinates are a blur. Anyone with sense steers their boat way clear. The government's? Not touching it with a 10-foot pole. But the legend? Oh, that's alive and kicking. A battlefield that never shut up, soldiers' agony soaked deep into the dirt. If you're the believing type, that place isn't just haunted, it's a scar that never closed. War looping on repeat, echoing in the leaves and the roots, waiting for the next sucker with a microphone.